and happy Dejuary. I'm your host, Dr. Wolfula, and when I'm not planning to eat Linnea Quigley alive, if you know what I mean, I'm here at the Oaks West Mall reviewing movies. I was recently willed this shopping mall by a great uncle I never even met. Ever since the Burlington Coat Factory across the street burned down, the Oaks West Mall has become one of those malls with mostly empty stores and declining business. What do they call those kinds of malls again? Oh yeah, a deceased shopping center. But I'm intent to turn things around. We just opened a new pottery store here, and we're going to open 3 more pottery stores by the end of the month. We're gonna have more customers than we know what to do with.
You like sex with death?
Get some fuck up and die.
As I return this mall from the dead, it feels only fitting I also bring about the return of Dejuary, my celebration of zombie cinema, with a review of one of the best zombie films of all time, The Return of the Living Dead, released in 1985 and written and directed by the late Dan O'Bannon, Alien franchise creator and opium addict.
Oh no, he got a job. What a dick!
2025, of course, marks the 40th anniversary of Return of the Living Dead's release, and the year that supposedly a new legacy sequel will premiere, made by Steve Walsh, a writer/director whose previous films have an average IMDb rating of 3 out of 10, so you know it's gonna be good.
I like it. It's a statement.
The Return of the Living Dead itself began as a proposed sequel to the original Night of the Living Dead by the film's co-writer John A. Russo, who went his separate ways creatively from Night of the Living Dead's much more successful director/co-writer, the late George Romero, who of course made his own series of sequels starting with Dawn of the Dead.
This was an important place in their lives.
Russo shifted gears in the 70s and became an author, starting with a novelization of Night of the Living Dead in 1974. Followed by a sequel to the novelization in 1977 titled Return of the Living Dead. This novel has nothing to do with the final film it shares its title with, though. It was a direct sequel to Night of the Living Dead that took place several years later in the same town after the undead were eliminated. In the wake of the original movie's events, residents of the town stab their deceased in the head out of paranoia that they will return as zombies.
If you had a gun, shoot him in the head. That's a sure way to kill him.
But when a bus full of people crashes and ends up dead, a new wave of zombies emerge that can't be contained.
That's another one for the fire.
Texas Chainsaw Massacre director Tobe Hooper was attached to helm an adaptation of Russo's novel Return of the Living Dead, but delays led to Hooper directing Life Force instead, leading to Life Force's co-writer Dan O'Bannon to put his hat in the ring as the new director of Return of the Living Dead, doing a rewrite from top to bottom of John Russo's story to the point that the final film's plot has absolutely nothing to do with the novel beyond sharing the same title, for the sake of making O'Bannon's film distinct from Romero's Dead films, the third of which, Day, released a few months before Return of the Living Dead premiered. The funny thing is that John Russo ended up writing a novelization of the movie Return of the Living Dead based on Dan O'Bannon's screenplay, creating a confusing situation where there are 2 books with the same title and author, but with completely different plots.
Come on, you're shitting me, right?
I've never been more serious in my life.
Now, because he was too busy smoking opium and banging prostitutes in Amsterdam, Return of the Living Dead was one of only 2 films O'Bannon directed before he passed away in 2009. But his first movie's legacy lives on as one of the best zombie films ever made, and I'll explain why with my review of Return of the Living Dead. But first, I have a message from my sponsor, me. Pledge to my Patreon today to support the channel, help it continue to grow, and you'll also get access to weekly movie nights every Sunday and archive commentaries if you miss the movie nights live. Just $5 a month to get a movie night every week. Here are the movies I'll be streaming next Sunday. Pledge to patreon.com/Dr. Wolfula if you're interested in my bonus streams, and I thank you in advance.
No matter what happens, don't name it after me.
The Return of the Living Dead makes a bold claim in its opening that it's based on true events, which can be considered a stretch considering how over-the-top and campy it is, and the fact that zombies are involved, but this adds to the movie's satire. The movie sets itself up as a serious film documenting a real event with a specific timeline from the end of July 3rd to the start of July 4th in Louisville, Kentucky. But it's in reality a wackier-than-usual zombie movie, a departure from the comparatively grounded Romero films that thrived on social commentary.
Maybe if there was more cooperation around here, your men wouldn't have to risk their asses quite as often.
Usually with something like Texas Chainsaw Massacre, saying it's based on a true story when it's only loosely inspired by true events, that can make a horror movie scarier because it adds to the immersion of the experience. But saying that the events of a movie like Return of the Living Dead actually happened just makes the movie funnier. The average person is dumb too. They'll just read a news headline and take it on face value. They won't read an article or do any of their own research. They'll just take one streamlined source as the truth. You say a movie is based on a true story, no matter how ridiculous it is, there will be a segment of an audience willing to believe it.
That's not possible. I mean, they showed zombies taking over the world.
They changed it all around.
Return of the Living Dead deals with two separate but connected stories that eventually converge and diverge in interesting ways, involving a varied group of punks waiting for their friend Freddy to finish working his new job as a stock boy at Unita Medical Supply.
International treaty. All skeletons come from India.
No kidding, how come?
How the hell do I know?
Freddy here is played by Tom Matthews, who was ironically in a Jason movie, best known for playing Tommy Jarvis in one Friday the 13th flick and 36 fan films.
Come on, I'm standing here waiting! Come on, you pussy!
Well, Freddy is a punk trying to turn his life around for his girl Tina. In the Russo novelization of the film, it's revealed that Freddy had a friend who recently OD'd. So Freddy believes finding honest work will keep him on a better path from the one his friends are on, who totally don't see anything wrong with killing time in a graveyard.
You go fool around in there for a while.
Let's do that.
Essentially, Return of the Living Dead combines the zombie genre with certain slasher tropes popular in the 80s, specifically with the film's disposable cast of young adults who do things and go places they really shouldn't and end up paying the price for it. Most of the cast appeared in horror flicks before. Tom Matthews appeared in Friday the 13th Part 6 Jason Lives, of course, but you have two other Friday the 13th alumni who appeared in Part 5 A New Beginning the same year Return of the Living Dead released. The fully decked out punk Suicide, played by Mark Venturini, also played Vic in Part 5. The guy who thankfully ended up taking out Joey without facing any consequences by Joey's vengeful father.
What do you think this is all about? You think this is a fucking costume? This is a way of life.
And you also have voodoo maestro Miguel A. Nunez Jr. playing Spider in Return of the Living Dead, but he also played Demon in Part 5, who's a demon on the toilet when he eats damn enchiladas.
Damn enchiladas!
Freddy's foreman at Unita, Frank, was played by James Karen, who played another crooked boss in Poltergeist.
Son of a bitch, you moved the cemetery, but you left the bodies, didn't you?
Clu Gulager as Bert, the owner of Unita, also played the dad in Nightmare on Elm Street 2. John Philbin as Chuck was also in Children of the Corn, and Jules Shepard has appeared in a slew of exploitation flicks, but notably this horror movie had a real monster on its set. Brian Peck played Scuzz, but he's also a real-life Scuzz, a convicted sex offender who abused Drake Bell in 2001.
You're dead, man, and you're gonna turn into one of those things out there!
Brian Peck is also a massive fan of John Wayne Gacy and was in contact with the serial killer by mail, even receiving an autographed painting by Gacy. This is the kind of fun trivia I like to share about horror movies. Speaking of fun, though, most notably featured in the cast of Return of the Living Dead is the deadpan redhead Trash.
I ain't in no mood tonight.
I like death.
Played by the queen of B-movies, Linnea Quigley, the titties of 1,000 faces.
Do you ever wonder about all the different ways of dying?
Trash's whole thing is that she has a fascination with death. The idea of dying turns her on, and nothing gets her hornier than being in a graveyard.
They would tear off my clothes.
Reason enough for her to strip and dance naked, easily one of the highlights of the film for obvious reasons. But Linnea Quigley as Trash is a very calculated creative choice for the film. Return of the Living Dead is a zombie movie aiming for a slasher movie crowd, but zombie movies aren't paced out like a typical slasher film. So you can't easily have situations where characters have an excuse to get naked or have sex, but Trash is by design a compromise. As her name implies, she's pretty trashy, dead stuff gets her hot, she ditches her clothes and ends up being naked for the rest of the movie. And it's Linnea Quigley, probably the best option if you can only have one chick naked for your entire movie.
I'm hot.
You are hot. Scram, wimp.
And she inevitably becomes one of the first fully naked zombie chicks. A bit of a butterface in this form, though. Speaking of zombies, well, Freddy's boss Frank tells a story explaining that the movie Night of the Living Dead was inspired by a true story.
Did you see that movie? Night of the Living Dead. Did you know that movie was based on a true case?
This is an early example of a meta-horror movie, placing itself in a semblance of the real world, but it also basically says, those Romero zombie movies were just movies. We're telling the real story with our movie.
Come on, you're shitting me, right?
According to Frank, to avoid lawsuits, Night of the Living Dead was only loosely based on a true story about a chemical called 2,4,5-trioxin, an experimental defoliant developed by Darrow Chemical based on Agent Orange that was in this case intended to be used to destroy hippie cannabis crops.
If he told the true story, they'd just sue his ass off.
Well, this chemical leaked into a morgue and supposedly caused the bodies to move around. The bodies were sent in canisters by the Army back to Darrow Chemical for inspection.
And it made all the dead bodies kind of jump around as though it was alive.
But the Army fucked up and sent them to Unita Medical Supply by mistake. It's never really directly addressed why the bodies weren't retrieved later or why Unita never sent them to the right address later. The explanation is set off screen.
Why didn't you call this number immediately? I see. It's understandable.
It's all just a joke about how these canisters are just a plot device to start up another zombie uprising as Frank shows U.S. Army incompetence in full effect.
These things were made by the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers.
Exposing himself and Freddy to the zombie virus, along with the cadavers residing within Unita.
What the hell happened to the body?
Return of the Living Dead is a zombie movie with slasher elements, but a big part of what makes it really entertaining when there isn't gore or zombies on screen is that it's a comedy of errors. The characters just keep fucking up and making their already bad situation worse.
Listen, I don't guess we better tell Bert about this. It makes us look stupid or something.
When Freddy and Frank wake up and find themselves surrounded by dead things that aren't so dead anymore, trying to crush poor split dogs and fearing the living cadaver in cold storage, instead of getting help from the authorities right away, Frank shifts responsibility for the situation onto his superior Bert.
We have a little problem.
Who's only out to save his ass and insists on them destroying all evidence that they raised the dead.
We'll have to kill it.
Which means letting the pissed off cadaver out of the cooler and hitting it over the head with a pickaxe, unleashing a butt-naked Homer Simpson in the process.
Oh, get him off!
And when the group tries to destroy the beloved cartoon dad's brain, they find it doesn't work like in the movies. They try to sever the head, but they just end up with a headless naked guy running around. It's a funny, efficient way to establish how the zombies in Return of the Living Dead are different from conventional zombies, and how movies warp our expectations.
I thought you said if we destroyed the brain, it'd die. It worked in the movie!
You shoot a zombie in the head in a George Romero zombie flick, it's dead. That's it. Every part of a zombie in Return of the Living Dead has a mind of its own that desires one thing, like in a cartoon spoof, brains. The zombies are like junkies. They eat brains to ease their pain, and like Pandora's box, once the zombies are unleashed, you can't destroy a zombie in this movie without making things even worse long term. The zombies in this film are definitely a metaphor for pollution. Once the damage is done to an environment, it can't be reversed and things will only get worse. All we can hope to do is try to slow down and contain our impending destruction.
What are we gonna do?
Bert is clueless on how to handle this situation steadily getting out of his controls, so he just passes the responsibility onto somebody else, his mortician friend Ernie.
Hey, Ray.
Of course a guy named Bert's best friend is Ernie. I wonder if they're lovers too.
Take it easy.
Sorry, I didn't hear you.
Ernie's an interesting character because, on the surface, as played by Don Calfa, he comes off as a nice, helpful, and sensible guy.
I'm gonna need some help, Ernie.
Depend on me, what's wrong?
Probably the character with the most pleasant personality in the film, so Ernie's given an extreme character flaw to offset his positive traits through the details surrounding him. Ernie's a fucking Nazi! He listens to German marching music. He has both a poster of Hitler and a photo of Eva Braun up on his wall, and he wields a Walther P-38 pistol, standard issue of the Nazis during World War II. Ernie Kaltenbrunner even shares his name with a high-ranking leader within the Nazi party, Ernst Kaltenbrunner, and running a crematorium is another dark allusion to the Holocaust.
The pain of being dead.
Hurts to be dead.
According to Dan O'Bannon, Ernie is intended to be a Nazi in hiding who's doing a pretty bad job of it, but Ernie's Nazi sympathies are never directly addressed in the movie. He's never racist towards the film's one black character. This odd detail added to Ernie makes what would otherwise be a straightforward character into something more dark and memorable.
You have a crematorium, right?
You want to burn them? That's cruel!
The Unita boys desperately turn to Ernie to dispose of the severed but still animated remains of Springfield's nuclear nuclear safety inspector, and Bert comes up with the most ridiculous lies imaginable just so he can use Ernie's furnace and solve their problem as quickly and easily as possible.
What the hell is in those bags?
Rabid weasels.
What?
But like I said, it just makes things worse. They were able to burn the zombies' remains, but the fumes end up getting into the atmosphere, causing acid rain to drench the nearby cemetery and raise a legion of the dead. The zombies in Return of the Living Dead are a full-blown cartoon version of zombies, and the film fully embraces this. They not only just want to exclusively eat brains.
Why do you eat people?
Not people, brains.
But they effortlessly rise out of their graves like there aren't coffins and 6 feet of dirt in their path. These zombies can also talk and use that to their advantage,
Send more paramedics.
drawing more police and paramedics into this situation for the zombies to have more brains to eat.
Send more cops.
The film takes place in this totally empty and isolated part of Louisville. It's as dead as the zombies. There's no hope of getting help.
Everybody that comes in gets swallowed up.
Even though this is a comedy, it does manage to be pretty scary just for how relentless and unstoppable the zombies in this film are. The Romero zombies are threats in numbers that can be dispatched or contained when people work as a team, but the real conflict in those films come from human aggressors. Return of the Living Dead focuses purely on the zombies and making them as overpowered a threat possible while still being zombies.
What are you doing? You can't just leave them. They turn the goddamn car over and we'll send help.
Return of the Living Dead is a full-blown EC Comics take on zombies done in live action, running the gamut from normal, slightly decayed zombies to Ray Harryhausen skeletons, and with the film realizing much more out-there ideas like brain-hungry dwarves and a topless lady crypt keeper torso.
I can feel myself rot.
But the film's highlight zombie is, of course, Tarman, played by Muppeteer Alan Troutman. As EC Comics of a zombie design you can possibly get, a skeletal mummy that seems like he's only being held together by the layer of muck he's covered in. It's really freakishly uncanny how he single-mindedly shambles around with barely any physical form. The film takes its zombification to another level of body horror, though, as it's revealed that Freddy and Frank slowly transform into zombies after being exposed to the canister's toxic gas.
I got the chills. It's that stuff, Bert.
But unlike usual with zombie media, where an infected victim will eventually die and just come back as a zombie, becoming a zombie in this film is more of a process where you slowly and gradually become undead, where you reach a midpoint where you essentially are dead.
Technically, you're not alive.
But still somehow conscious and moving, and eventually beyond this point, the hunger for brains overwhelms you. It's pretty horrifying to see the two characters we meet first in the movie get to know the most, slowly and painfully lose their humanity like this, especially seeing how much Tina loves Freddy, and the zombie Freddy only tries to use Tina's love for him to his advantage.
Got to let me eat your
It makes it clear that this is a movie where anybody can die, and it definitely lives up to that.
Coming up, Tina.
Return of the Living Dead is thoroughly inventive in the execution of its zombie threat, but the movie's characters shine through the darkness too. All of the characters are distinct and memorable besides Scuzz. Even the punks aren't just interchangeable victims when they easily could have been.
Yeah, what does he think we are? Weird or something?
The film is also structured like, say, a sitcom. You have an A plot and a B plot that shifts back and forth where we get to see different aspects of the zombie attack from different perspectives. It gives the film a faster pace. It never slows down, limiting itself to one group of characters for too long. When the excitement starts to die down in a scene, the movie switches to a scene with more zombie mayhem, and it makes the film feel larger in scope when it really just takes place in 3 locations. The performances of the film are also solid, especially for such a campy B-movie. Even when things get goofy, the actors take it totally seriously and sell the horror of, like, a puppet on a table.
Shut up!
And the older stars help keep the film grounded.
How do we kill those things?
You don't.
James Cameron's performance in this movie is pretty brilliant. He starts off as seeming like this gruff, competent mentor figure. But once things get out of his control and scary, he fucking cries and whines for the whole movie.
No, that's the army! You know what, the goddamn army around this place?
It really sells this situation as truly horrible.
I don't think I can do this, Bert!
He can't hold it together for a moment. James Cameron is a total Karen. Clu Gulager's performance is a great contrast as this authority figure you know is totally full of shit who's just trying to get what he wants, but he always maintains composure.
Fred, come here. Get down there. Please, stand by the door. It's gonna be all right, son.
Powering through the film's events because he knows it's his only hope for survival. Doing what Bert thought was in his best interest got him in this situation to begin with, but deception and selfishness is the only ways he knows how to get himself out of it.
Well, I just can't do that. You gotta take my word for it.
Miguel A. Nunez Jr. as Spider is also a standout. Spider recedes into the background for most of the film and doesn't meet Bert and Ernie down on Sesame Street until an hour into the film.
Ain't no way to stop those things. We gotta get the fuck out.
But Spider ends up seamlessly taking the place of Frank and Freddy as kind of the third main character of the film and rises above his cowering punk friends as a sledgehammer-wielding hero who survives up until the end of the movie.
Apparently they got some sort of contingency plan to deal with.
What is this plan?
Now, before I move on to talking about the ending of Return of the Living Dead, I just want to mention that this movie has a kick-ass soundtrack. The score is solid 80s synth music, but the licensed tracks really stand out. It's a varied selection of punk rock music by the likes of the Cramps, the Damned, the Flesh Eaters, and Stacy Q. That perfectly fits the characters and situations. It at times can feel like watching a gory episode of Scooby-Doo, Where Are You? Admittedly, Return of the Living Dead feels like it just decides to end once it approaches the 90-minute mark. A lot of the characters are still alive by the final act. It feels like Chuck and Casey were mostly useless sitting around waiting things out. They might as well have had Tarman eat them or something. Out of options, Bert finally calls somebody who can actually handle this situation. In this case, Colonel Glover, who has spent 14 years trying to track down the canisters and doing a pretty bad job of it.
Your favorite, lamb chops.
I had them for lunch.
And the situation has reached a point where Glover is forced to carry out his contingency plan, nuking 20 square blocks of Louisville, Kentucky. Only killing 4,000 people. Better than it's spreading throughout the world, after all.
I wouldn't worry about the fires, General. The rain is taking care of that right now.
Except unbeknownst to Glover, the ashes of the obliterated zombies rain down over all of Louisville, raising the dead in time for an upcoming visit from the president.
Yes, sir. I understand the president will visit Louisville tomorrow.
This ending basically evokes the ending of the original Night of the Living Dead on a grander and more pessimistic scale, where all of the characters are killed alongside their zombie pursuers. Though in this case, the humans aren't mistaken for zombies, they're just seen as a necessary loss. The ending of Return of the Living Dead is also the perfect hook for a sequel where the zombie plague spreads in Louisville and the president ends up in peril. So of course the second movie completely ignores this ending. It'd be too expensive, and 80s horror sequels are not about expensive. Even the new Legacy sequel supposedly coming out in 2025 will seemingly ignore the original movie's sequel hook ending, instead taking place 18 months after the first film on Christmas. But waiting out there somewhere is a perfect Return of the Living Dead sequel that uses the original film's ending as a jumping off point. It's right fucking there!
Show some fucking respect for the dead, will ya?
Return of the Living Dead is an all-around fantastic zombie comedy. It has just the right amount of horror and humor where it's not silly to the point where it's a total farce, but it also doesn't take itself too seriously. The performances are good, the effects are fantastic, the use of the zombies is creative, the soundtrack is kick-ass, and Linnea Quigley is naked for most of the movie. It doesn't get much better than this. I give Return of the Living Dead a naked Linnea Quigley out of zombie naked Linnea Quigley.
Tasha's taking off her clothes again.
Before I go, I want to check in with my zombie serving goulash at the Oaks West Mall's brand new pottery store, Pottery Plus.
Oh, hey, Goulash here.
How's business been on opening day?
Well, we've been open for 11 hours and nobody's entered the store except for me.
What, nobody?
Well, one guy walked by the store, but when he made eye contact with me, he walked in the other direction.
He was probably looking for other people to tell about the store.
Yeah, I'm sure that was exactly what he was doing.
Anyway, I'm sure once we open the 3 other pottery stores, business will start to pick up.
Yeah, about that, sir. When I was clearing out one of the spaces for Pottery Paradise, I found a bunch of canisters with biohazard symbols on them.
So?
So what am I supposed to fucking do with them? I think customers are gonna get sick if we don't get rid of them.
Just dump them in the graveyard.
What graveyard?
The one next door to the mall.
I don't know how I didn't notice that before. I don't think I feel comfortable desecrating a cemetery by dumping toxic ooze in it.
I don't think I feel comfortable. That's what you sound like. That's what you sound like right now. Well, you're gonna have to desecrate a graveyard whether you like it or not, and get it done by tomorrow. I want to make sure Pottery Paradise is open on schedule.
Well, alright, I'll get to it, I guess.
Excellent. Things are looking bright for the Oaks West Mall. This video is made possible through the pledges of my Patreon supporters, and I'd like to give a very special thanks to the kind folks pledged to my shoutouts tier. All of their support on Patreon means a lot to me, and it helps my dark influence continue to grow. If you liked this video, like it, and if you loved it, click the subscribe and bell buttons for more videos. Be sure to also keep in touch by following me on social media at Dr. Wolfula. While I still have your attention, consider pledging to my Patreon to support the channel and get bonus content like private movie night streams with me and credits in my videos. Consider pledging at patreon.com/Dr. Wolfula. Also, check out official Dr. Wolfula merch on tpublic.com/user/Dr. Wolfula. Thanks for watching. Dr. Wolfula signing out.